Brian Moran, founder of GovernmentCIO. Welcome to GovernmentCIO Magazine.
Hi, this is Olivia Ung with GovernmentCIO Magazine. Today we'll be watching GovernmentCIO's own Scott Gould presenting at OSEHRA about the improvement of VistA using Agile delivery.
And again, I apologize for not being the former Undersecretary of Defense. I've gotten very used to seeing looks of disappointment on people's faces at this conference as I showed up. What I'm basically going to be talking about today is, has Agile maturity at VA helped VistA projects deliver quickly? And I'll spare you waiting until the end. It has, yes, and I'm going to take you through very quickly our process and show you a few results. And if there are any VistA people here that disagree or you don't like Agile on your project, please feel free to jump in. I should have enough time to answer your questions, and if it goes too long, I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. This is just a brief overview, Agile at VA, our maturity assessment of Agile, VistA projects, challenges for VistA projects, the results of mentoring, and then a few benefits. And the benefits aren't necessarily overall what Agile can do for you, but more of, this is the process at VA, and this is how this can hopefully help you there. We've mentored over 50 projects during the past 2 years. The main thing that we do, because normally in Agile there isn't a project manager, but at VA there is, so we bring the project managers into it. They are still in charge of the project. We just teach them how to work with an Agile project, how to keep that transparency from the team, how to palm off some of the day-to-day work that they don't really need to do anyway onto the Agile roles, allowing them to focus on the higher levels, the communication between the teams, the upper levels. And we make sure that the mentoring topics are also based on what their team is doing. Some teams might not need certain implementation in certain areas, so we do try to come in with a unique solution. We don't want to come in with, I went to Scrum Master School and this is how everything must be done, because originally Agile was brought in as sort of a response against the rigidity of some of the other methodologies. And the one thing I'm afraid of is that as it's here longer and longer, you're going to get people becoming very rigid with it and going, well, this is what the book said, and not incorporating the individual needs of each team. And so we try to be very cognizant of that. Big thing, they still have to comply with PMs and ProPad. Those are VA requirements for now. Maybe those will change in the future, we hope, but any requirement that you have to have at VA is written into your backlog as a work story. So it isn't, the team is working on development, and then they've still got these deliverables sitting out here that people aren't aware of. We write those in as stories. Everybody on the team knows they're coming. If somebody on the team happens to have expertise in that area, they can jump in and help the PM with it. And that's what's important to us, is making sure everybody on the team knows what everybody else is doing. Not only do you share expertise, but you're also less likely to overburden people with work because you didn't know that they were going to spend 15 hours working on a PMS or a ProPath requirement. Confidentiality, don't share what's going on in one team with other teams, and that's one of our requirements to mentor. We promise the teams that, so that's why you're not going to see any actual backlogs from teams, even though they probably wouldn't care, but we don't want to bring their business out. And management basically just wants real-time insight into the programs, visibility into the progress. They do want Agile implementation. They want greater and more frequent releases. PMS originally was intended to be something like that, having some sort of a completion every 6 months. We're trying to move that into a shorter time frame. And they want to implement automated testing, and so that's bringing the testers onto the team instead of completely loading up all of your development and then handing it off at the end as you're going towards release and doing all the testing at that time. You still need to do that. They want to make sure that everything as a whole works perfectly, but we also encourage them to implement testing as they go. It's greatly reduced the bugs that they're hitting at the end. They still have a few things that they catch, but a lot of the integration issues are caught very, very early, right as they're being done, and they're much easier to correct at that point. This is just a very brief chart. This is what's required at the VA. The little circle in the middle, the PMs States, and we have sort of flexed Agile around that. You can see at the beginning we have the program backlog, then we bend it down. You have your sprint zero, which VA already does, your ramping up period, and then we bring it into the normal Agile Scrum process with the 2 to 4 week sprints. We do prefer 2, but some teams will push back on that, and we're happy to work with them on that. The daily stand-ups, which is basically just a very, very short meeting where everybody tosses what they're doing, what they did, and if they're having any blockers. And then the retrospectives, the reviews. And we have given them a few other ways to do things. Management, for instance, wants insight into what the program is doing, but a lot of people don't have time to focus in on what 20 teams under them are doing. So we do encourage the teams to have either a scrum of scrums where each team says, this is what our team is working on, this is what we've completed, we're going to throw this impediment in team number 4's way, or this is why we can't move. And management there should be able to take care of some of these issues. And the reason that's important is because a lot of times when teams are siloed, they're afraid of throwing somebody else under the bus. But I at another agency, I won't name which one, we would get the SESs in there, and so they would start to say, hey, you guys haven't completed this. You were supposed to complete it 2 sprints ago. What happened? And you'd see the product owner freeze, and then finally it would be, well, we haven't gotten a call back from this other team yet. And you see the person just turn around, look at the other team in the audience, and impediment cleared. So we do like to bring management into a scrum of scrums, or if they can't do that, we like to combine our sprint reviews with multiple teams so everybody can look at what everybody else is doing. Any transparency is helpful because I think it was 65% of teams that did not meet their deadlines at VA didn't meet them because of an outside dependency on somebody else. But those teams got blamed for it, and the impediment was never cleared for them. 80% of your impediments are cleared the second anybody knows that SESs are showing up to a meeting with all of your teams there. This is just the basic process we go over them. The one thing that every team should be doing, a daily scrum, so that everybody on the team is aware of what's going on. They have to have a backlog, and the backlog has to be comprehensive. They cannot leave things out. And you will always hear, there's always an excuse to not put something in the backlog. It's not that we're trying to micromanage. If it's in the backlog, you don't have to work till 3 a.m. on a Sunday because your project manager didn't know how much work you had. That's it. That's the only reason. Nobody's trying to run your life. We just want to make sure that you're not overburdened. The backlog grooming, the stories, and this is one thing that you might find with developers. They're very used to writing out what they're doing in a very technical way. The story should be written in a way that anybody can understand them. So another developer on the team knows what they're doing, but a Scrum Master who was maybe a liberal arts major in college can also understand what's going on. So the story can be as vague as creating a login page for Dr. So-and-so's prostate cancer software. And then you can get more technical in the acceptance criteria so that anybody who looks at it knows how that story is complete. They know when they're done. They don't need to ask their boss when they're finished. But the Scrum Master can also look at that and go, oh, they're creating a login page. And that's one of the things that it takes you a little bit of time with the developers, with the Scrum Master. You've got to get it a nice happy medium. And in the end, they are happier that they don't need to write 2 pages for each story. Roles and responsibilities, I don't need to go into that. You need who you need. The sprint retrospective, that's a team-only event. Management is not there, where the team can discuss what went well, how to keep it going well, and if there were any problems at a lower level. So-and-so, you never pick up your phone. We were delayed 2 days on this, but we don't want management to be in there, so the team can work these things out at a very low level. If there's a larger problem, they escalate it up to the Scrum Master who runs with it. And that's a main part of the Scrum Master's role, is making sure that any problems are dealt with by either them or they escalate it up. You don't want your developers spending 3 days trying to work out a communication problem. They should be able to do their work. Okay, so very quickly on VistA, one of the arguments we hear back from VistA is when we get information in, the teams outside aren't working Agile. It doesn't matter. This is just how your team works, and it still needs to be tested. It still needs to be integrated into VA. And it doesn't matter who's handing it to you, if it's a grad student in Albuquerque who created a patch for a problem that we didn't know VistA had, or if it's a university in Paris that's spent 6 years developing something. However they developed it, when you are given that code, you can process it in an Agile way. It's short, bursts, testing as you go, making sure it's as bug-free as possible. So that's just one of the things we want to make clear to the VistA teams, that it doesn't matter where it came from. You don't need to work the process that the team that gave it to you worked. Our Agile maturity assessment, we give it to every team as we get there. I apologize for the small text on here. Basically, it's 3 levels. It gives us insight into how advanced the team is in this methodology, and certain more specific questions let us know where they really need mentoring. Teams might be doing phenomenal backlogs, but they don't have a daily scrum. Nobody knows what's going on. So we do look at that, not only at their score, but we also look at where they might be lacking or where they might be excelling. We've mentored 12 VistA projects. Some of them might be familiar to you, some of you might have worked with them. And the only challenges that we really have for VistA teams is they're often large, which just means a slightly longer daily scrum. You don't need to split them up into 2 groups. You still want to make sure everybody knows what's going on, but you do need to be careful. A lot of times people will discuss an issue ad nauseum at a meeting if given a chance. And it might be a very important conversation. It might need to get solved that day. Just have them wait till after the meeting, like we were doing with questions here. And that can handle, they can handle that without dragging 13 other people on the team that don't need to be a part of that discussion into the discussion. So that's one of the things with a larger team. You do have to be more rigid on, what are you doing? Okay, you can solve that later. You two can talk about it, you can have the room, but move on. Team members are often geographically dispersed. With the new software, that's not as much of a problem as it used to be. We've got some pretty good conferencing software. It's not the same as being in a room, but at Capital One, we had teams in California, at Richmond, and in India, and the only problem we really had was trying to figure out that tiny little time frame when everybody was at work. And once we got that solved, the software took care of the rest. And again, the challenges are mitigated at VA by the use of RTC and Link. Results of mentoring. Late increment delivery. These teams, a late increment, another late increment, and up there 2 late increments. Pre-mentoring, post-mentoring, so far 0 late increments. And so that's the results board I wanted to get you, and that's usually what I would like to show developers that at first are a little hesitant, developers, PMs, with bringing in a new methodology to a VistA team, is that we really have seen results. They are not coming up with the late increments as they used to. They are hitting their deadlines. And a lot of that is because their deadlines become more reasonable, because as they're planning, as they see the amount of work that they're capable of, as their developers are not being pulled in 14 different directions because the Scrum Master is preventing outside teams from coming in and dragging them out, they are able to do more work, but they also are more rationally able to predict the amount of work they're doing. And we really have seen some good results. Even on the teams that didn't deliver late before, there's less frustration with not knowing what the next thing you're going to be working on, because they can look ahead. And a lot of times, a developer is your best friend as a PM, because they might look ahead at the backlog, and there might be something a month coming in a month out, and they said, well, why am I doing this if that's the goal? This doesn't make sense. And we've saved a lot of time just by letting the developers know what it is they're supposed to be working on. And so we were very happy with the result. Hopefully, we'll continue to move in that direction as the teams incorporate. Additional benefits. Fewer issues during final testing. I already went into that. If you test as you go, it's not going to show up as a bug later on. And if you solve this little bug here, you're preventing not only a larger bug, but them having to backtrack through the web to figure out what originally caused this problem. Customer acceptance. Every 2 weeks, ideally, you get your customer at the sprint review to say, yes, I like the direction you're going. Yes, I like what it is that you've done. Therefore, at the end, you don't have to spend a month arguing back and forth with your customer to get them to sign the customer acceptance form. It's done. They've given you tacit acceptance every 2 weeks, which you record. And so it's a formality at the end. You hand them the customer acceptance form, they've been at all your sprint reviews, they sign it off, and you're done. Right now, this is a somewhat cumbersome process at VA, which leads to point number 3, the approval team. When I ask them, what are your biggest problems? They want to turn around to approve what it is the teams have done in 10 days. Biggest problem, we can't find the customer that's involved with the team. The team has never spoken to the customer. We try to go in and negotiate with the customer. Has this work been done? I don't know, I've never seen any of it. So if you can get the customers involved through a 2-week sprint review, or if they're incredibly busy, you bring them into every other sprint review, or if you have to, every 2 months. Whatever it is you can do, any involvement you can bring into them, the approval team, it becomes, I mean, you turn in your work. Right now they're trying to hit 10 days. They can probably get you out of there in 3, 4, or 5 if everything is signed and sealed. So that's one of the main things that we want to help with at VA is any time that we can cut down on people running around just trying to find a particular person to look at work you've been doing for the last year and then going through it and hoping that they don't miss something as they're going through it. That's the main point of what we're trying to do, and I think that's why we've seen some success is just by the involvement of the people higher up. And I'm sorry, I rushed through. I wasn't exactly sure. There's not a clock in here, so
You're doing great.
if anybody, oh great, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. If not, I will hand it off to the next speaker. Yes.
I'll ask a question. So this methodology constitutes a part of what VA does, and there's other methodologies, I assume, that are in use in parts of VA for software development as well. What do you see as the relationship between the use of different methodologies and innovation, the ability to create new and impactful software?
The one reason I like Agile, and maybe this is only for me, is it was a little bit instinctive. At AARP, I didn't walk in there and want to change them. What I saw was a problem. This one area of AARP needed a database. And, okay, they were going to take 3 years was the prediction to develop it for this area. But nobody knew where it was. And so I got in there and just started going down to IT every few days. How's it going? What's going on? And what I found out is when somebody in IT kind of disdainfully said, oh, you're one of those Agile people, I had no idea what they were talking about. I had to go look it up. And a lot of what I wanted to do, find out what was going on, where are we, where do we go from here, was sort of encoded in that methodology. That's why I liked it, is because that sort of transparency was a little bit instinctive. You didn't have a 3-year goal, and then they showed up in 3 years, and then what was always happening is, well, that campaign we were running that we needed this database for took a turn 8 months ago. We're not doing it that way. We don't need this. And that's one of the reasons. Another reason I like it is it's a little bit more nimble. Currently under contracting language, if a change is too large, you do need to go through a change control board at VA. With Agile, up to the point where it interferes with the contract, you can switch things out. If you're doing an open source type of development and somebody develops something better outside, as long as your contract is worded more goal-oriented, we are going to develop something to do this, which Agile contracts tend to be, you can switch out that work and maybe make part of your work incorporating that patch rather than developing the original piece that you were going to do. Under I'll use waterfall for example. Under a waterfall contract, it locks you into the step-by-step, and so you are told, we have to develop this. So some high school student out in, Los Angeles just developed something that was actually better than what your 30 developers are working on because they're a prodigy, and I'm sure anybody here that is a corporate sponsor would love to hire that kid as soon as he graduates. But he develops something wonderful, or she does. You can bring it in and incorporate it in an Agile type situation. You just substitute out the development story for an incorporation story. That's in a perfect world. Right now, that isn't exactly what's happening because people do want to track what goes on and they want to make sure that they're not getting too far off the contract.